All because I refused to cook a meal for the one that got away in Graham Sterling's life. He revoked the authorization for my mother's pre-scheduled specialty medication and specialist consultation, begging him to reinstate the payment. I waited outside his house all night in the snow, burning up with a fever. The night my mother took a critical turn, I called him again and again, only to get the cold, automated message that I'd been blocked. 2 days later, my mother passed away from complications of late-stage cancer. Meanwhile, Serena Voss posted a photo of the two of them on her Instagram feed. If it's you in the end, even a little late is worth the wait. After the funeral, I went back to the apartment I'd lived in for 7 years and set the keys down in front of Graham Sterling. We're breaking up. He leaned against the couch, his face calm and unreadable. Vivian Reed. Don't try to scare me with a breakup. He had no idea. I could forgive him for favoring Serena, for leaving me stranded time after time. What I could never, ever forgive was that he'd gambled with my mother's last shot at life just to force me to back down. This time, I wasn't waiting for him to chase me. I was truly, finally done with him. 3 days after my mother's burial, I returned to Riverside Residences. Graham was sitting in the living room, in the middle of a video conference. When he saw me, he raised a hand to pause the call, finally decided to come home. On the coffee table sat a bowl of noodles, already swollen and cold. I'd made it for him before I left. For 7 whole days. He hadn't thrown it out, hadn't touched it either. He probably thought I was just throwing a tantrum. That once I cooled off, I'd reheat the cold noodles like I always did, and ask if he wanted an egg on top. I set the key card and house keys on the table. Graham, we're breaking up. He blinked, taken aback, then closed his laptop. Is this because I didn't make it to the hospital? Serena just got back into the country. The welcome home dinner party was full of business partners. I couldn't leave. I looked straight at him. My mother died. Graham's face went rigid. When? 5 days ago. That's impossible. He grabbed his phone, as if ready to prove I was lying again. Last month the doctor said she had at least 6 months left. I pulled a copy of the death certificate out of my bag and set it down next to the keys. Graham stared at the name on the paper. Eleanor Reed. Cause of death: complications related to late-stage cancer. His fingers hovered over the page for a long time. Why didn't you tell me? I almost laughed. I called you 47 times the night she crashed. You blocked me. Graham frowned. I only muted you temporarily. You kept calling that night, disturbing Serena's rest. And I told you once you came to your senses, apologized to her, I'd reinstate the treatment. I didn't think Mrs. Reed would suddenly. He trailed off. Probably even he knew how hollow I didn't think sounded. I didn't want to hear any more. When I turned to leave, he grabbed my wrist from behind. Vivian, calm down. Mrs. Reed's illness was already end stage. Even without those 2 days, there's no guarantee she would've. I turned to face him. The doctors also said no treatment can guarantee a result. That's why I'm not pressing charges, not demanding you pay for her life with yours. I'm just breaking up with you. Is that too much to ask? Graham's hand slowly fell away. He was quiet for a moment, then backed down just like he always did after every fight. You're upset right now. Go sleep in the guest room. We'll talk about this in a few days. I didn't take any of my luggage. Almost everything in that apartment had been bought by him. I only took the old scarf my mother had knit, Ted me, and the handwritten recipe book from the kitchen. Before I walked out the door, Graham was still sitting in the same spot. Vivian, don't burn every bridge. I didn't look back. The person who'd burned every bridge was never me. 7 days earlier, my mother was still alive. That afternoon, she was supposed to receive a round of self-pay specialty medication. The drug had been reserved by the hospital pharmacy, and an out-of-town specialist had cleared their schedule for the consultation. The treatment wouldn't reverse her condition. The doctor said if she responded well, it would at least control her pain and buy her a stretch of relatively stable days. At 3 in the afternoon, I sat by my mother's bedside waiting for the treatment to start. Graham called. Come cook a meal at Cloudview Estate tonight. Cloudview was the house he'd set up for Serena. I held my mother's cold hand in mine. I can't make it. Serena just got back. She can't get used to takeout. She remembers the herb-roasted duck with orange glaze you make. She's been craving it. Graham, my mother's having her treatment today. There was a pause on the other end. There are nurses and doctors there. You don't have to hover the whole time. But she needs me. Serena needs me too. I suddenly had nothing to say. Serena had lived abroad for 5 years. She had an assistant, a driver, and everything Graham had arranged for her. My mother was so thin she could barely hold a glass of water. But to him, those two needs carried the same weight. I'm not going. I hung up. 10 minutes later, a nurse hurried into the room. Ms. Reed. The pharmacy said the payment authorization was withdrawn. The scheduled out-of-town consultation has also been cancelled. I froze. My mother's treatment was expensive. 3 months prior, Graham had told me to quit my own catering job, saying he'd cover all future expenses. The payment was tied to his company's medical benefits account, and the pharmacy required confirmation by a set deadline. I called him back immediately. Why did you cut off my mother's treatment? I didn't cut off her basic hospital care. Graham said calmly. I only withdrew Sterling's coverage for the self-pay items. Go cook for Serena. Apologize to her. And I'll have finance reprove it. A cold chill ran through my body. The pharmacy cuts off payment at 4:30. The specialist is about to arrive. Then stop wasting time. Graham, this is my mother's life. His voice turned cold. Vivian Reed. Don't be dramatic. I asked my secretary. It's just one supplementary treatment. Missing it today isn't going to kill her. Have I spoiled you too much all these years? You think the whole world revolves around you. The line went dead. I rushed to the billing window and pulled out my own debit card. Insufficient funds. When the restaurant first launched, I'd poured all my savings into Graham's brand. Then my mother was diagnosed. I sold our old house and put every cent toward her treatment. What was left couldn't even pay for one vial of the drug. I called the bank to request a temporary credit limit increase, texted friends to borrow money, and asked the hospital if we could delay payment. The hospital agreed to hold the reservation until closing time, but the specialist team couldn't reschedule their return trip, and the drug couldn't be dispensed without payment. At 4:20, I was still short most of the fee. I texted Graham. I'll cook the meal. I'll say whatever apology you want. Just reinstate the treatment first, please. He didn't reply. When I arrived at Cloudview Estate, the snow was falling hard. The security guard wouldn't let me in. Mr. Sterling said no visitors for you tonight. Please tell him the hospital is waiting for payment. The guard shook his head. I called. He said you can stay outside and think about what you did. I already had a fever. After waiting outside for 2 hours, my legs could barely hold me up. I knelt in the snow and begged the guard to call one more time. Lights were on in the second-floor bedroom of the villa. Through the window, I saw Graham standing behind Serena, adjusting her shawl. He glanced outside. I don't know if he saw me. The curtain snapped shut a second later. At 11 that night, the hospital called. My mother had developed severe complications and was being rushed into emergency care. I pulled myself up using the fence. My legs were numb. I took 2 steps and collapsed into the snow. I crawled toward the road, calling Graham again and again. First call. No answer. 10th call. The line was busy. After the 20th, all I got was a cold, automated voice. The number you have dialed is temporarily unavailable. He'd blocked me. When I got back to the hospital, my mother had just been wheeled out of the ER. Tubes ran all over her body, and she could no longer speak in full sentences. The doctor pulled me into the hallway. The deterioration is tied to her underlying cancer. We can't pin it on one missed treatment, but we did lose a chance to try and stabilize her condition when the medication and consultation fell through. Today, right now we can only continue resuscitative care and keep her comfortable. You need to be prepared. I leaned against the wall to keep from falling. The nurse took my temperature. 102.6 degrees Fahrenheit. She tried to take me to the ER, but I refused. My mother was in that room. I couldn't leave her again. Early the next morning, she woke up briefly. Vivian. I leaned in close. I'm here, Mom. She saw my soaked pant cuffs and my red, frozen hands. Tears slid from the corners of her eyes into her hair. Did you go beg him again? I shook my head. No. The snow slowed traffic. I got back late. She was too weak to call me out on the lie. Her fingers twitched under the blanket. I took her hand. I don't want treatment anymore. Baby, don't owe him anything. I have money. The treatment's already paid for. I forced a smile. The doctor said you'll be home soon. She looked at me, her eyes full of heartache. You've always blinked when you lie. I squeezed my eyes shut tight. Tears still fell onto the back of her hand. She lifted her hand with great effort and touched my cheek. You're the one I worry about most. From now on, cook for yourself. Don't always wait or someone to come home. Those were the last words she said while she was still conscious. That same night, the hospital issued another critical condition notice. I borrowed from everyone I could, and finally scraped together part of the money. But the specialist was long gone, and the reserved medication had been reallocated to another patient per hospital policy. The doctors put together a new emergency treatment plan. I sat by her bed for 2 straight days, never sleeping. In the early hours of the 3rd day, the numbers on the monitor dropped one by one. My mother took her last breath, sedated and at peace. There was no dramatic dying in agony scene like the blurbs promised. The hospital did everything they could to ease her suffering, but I still wished had one more shot at treatment, and Graham had used that shot to force me to cook a meal. While I was filling out the death paperwork, a notification popped up on my phone. Serena had posted a new Instagram. She and Graham were sitting on a terrace. A fancy dinner spread sat on the table. I hadn't cooked it. In the photo, Graham was turned sideways, pouring her a glass of wine. The caption read, "If it's you in the end, even a little late is worth the wait." It had been posted exactly 1 minute before my mother stopped breathing. I didn't confront him. I didn't leave a comment. I just saved the photo, then blocked both of them. My mother's funeral didn't need them there, and my future didn't need them either. The funeral was small and simple. She'd never liked crowds, and she'd never wanted me to waste money on appearances. When I was going through her things, the funeral home staff asked which outfit I wanted her to wear. I pulled a deep purple coat out of my duffel. Graham had come with me to buy it at the mall 3 Christmases ago. Mom had complained about the price, saying she'd return it but she'd kept it carefully in its dust cover once we got home. She said she'd wear it to my wedding to Graham. The staff helped her into the coat. Her neck looked bare. I wrapped my old scarf around her, then paused before tucking it into her pocket. She'd knitted that scarf for me herself. It had taken her 2 months, and the stitches were uneven. I couldn't bear to let it go with her. In the end, I only cut off a small piece of thread and placed it in her palm. I held the rest of the scarf tight in my arms, like I was still holding onto a little piece of the warmth she'd given me. The night of the funeral vigil, Graham texted me, "When are you coming home?" Half an hour later, another one, "Serena's welcome dinner is over. Stop holding a grudge over one meal." I didn't reply. When the screen went dark, I could see my mother's portrait reflected in the black glass. I suddenly remembered the day she was diagnosed. The first thing she'd asked wasn't how long she had left. It was, "Is the treatment expensive? Don't let Vivian owe too many people." She'd been afraid of weighing me down until the day she died. And I'd accepted the apartment, the account, the treatment bills from Graham, all to hold on to him. I'd handed every important switch in my life over to him, so all it took was one press of a button for him to leave me with nowhere to go. At dawn, I canceled that supplementary benefits card. The limit had been restored to a very high number, but my mother was gone. Those digits could never buy back what I'd truly lost. When the cremation was done, the staff handed me the urn. It was so light, too light to hold a whole person's entire life. I was walking out of the building holding it when Graham's assistant called. "Ms. Reed, Mr. Sterling is asking how much longer you plan on being upset." I stopped on the steps. "Tell him something for me. Once I finish my mother's funeral, I'll go back and give him his answer." Graham and I had been together for 7 years. I met him when I was working as a cook at a small diner. He'd just taken over Sterling Group's least profitable restaurant subsidiary, trying to launch a new brand. And he couldn't even read a kitchen floor plan. The first time he tried my food, he finished every last bite of my clear chicken noodle soup. He said, "Vivian Reed, come work with me. I'll make it worth your while." After that, we pulled countless all-nighters together. I revised the menu. He chased down investors. The night before the first location opened, we ate takeout box lunches in the empty dining room. Graham suddenly looked up at me and asked, "Wanna go out with me?" I thought he was talking about the brand name. "Sorry, what?" He laughed and tapped my takeout box with his chopsticks. I said, "Do you wanna be my girlfriend?" Serena was already abroad by then. I had no idea she'd been the girl Graham had liked since high school. No idea his family had disapproved of their relationship. And she'd left for someone else out of spite. All I knew was that Graham was good to me. The first time my mother was admitted to the hospital, he'd cancelled all his meetings and stayed the whole night. When she wanted fresh white fish soup after surgery, he'd driven dozens of miles himself to buy the freshest catch. Mom had held his hand and said she trusted him to take care of me. He'd promised her solemnly, "Mrs. Reed, I'll take care of Vivian. And I'll take care of you too." That promise held until Serena came back. She mentioned wanting old-fashioned butter cookies from Southside, and he sent a driver across the city to get them. I had a fever, and he said he was busy with clients. Told me to take medicine myself. She'd casually complimented my herb-roasted duck, and he'd made me drop my mother's treatment to go cook it for her. It wasn't like I'd never put up a fight. Every single time. Graham had an explanation. "I'm just making it up to her. She has no family here. You're my girlfriend. Why do you have to be so petty about her?" After hearing it enough, I'd even started to wonder if I was being unreasonable. It wasn't until my mother died that I understood. Serena hadn't stolen him from me. Graham had, again and again, chosen to put me second to her. After leaving Riverside Residences, I crashed at my best friend Tess Monroe's apartment. She made up the couch for me and stood over me until I finished a bowl of rice porridge. "Does Graham know Mrs. Reed passed away?" "Yeah, what did he say?" I thought of his line, "There's no guarantee it had anything to do with those 2 days." "Nothing worth repeating." Tess slammed her spoon down in anger. "You wrote the first menu for that brand. You trained the first batch of staff. Now he treats you like a pet he can starve whenever he wants. Don't you still have the original partnership agreement?" I paused. When the brand launched, Graham had given me 8% equity. Half was actual paid-in capital stock. Half was a vesting incentive package. Then we started dating. And he said we didn't need to keep score like that as a couple. All these years, the dividends had gone into our shared account, and I'd barely looked at the financial reports. Tess squeezed my shoulders. "You can break up with him, but you don't have to walk away from what's yours." I thought of what my mother had said on her deathbed. Don't owe him anything, and by the same token don't let him owe me either. The next day, I called a lawyer. Graham didn't realize I'd actually moved out until 2 weeks later. That day, he sent his assistant over with a new supplementary card. The assistant called to ask for my address. "Ms. Reed." "Mr. Sterling said canceling the card was just a heat-off-them-it thing. Your limit's been restored. And the locks at Riverside Residences have been changed. Your fingerprints still in the system." I was staging a trial shift at a small diner. It was the first time I'd stepped back into a real kitchen since leaving Sterling Hospitality Group. The owner was a man in his 50s named Mr. Hale. He handed me 2 potatoes and half a chicken. "Make me something you're good at. No fancy plates. No imported ingredients. No stacks of reports spread across the table like at Sterling's RD meetings." I blanched the chicken, cut the potatoes into chunks, and stewed them with simple, common spices. Right before serving, I stirred in a spoonful of my mother's homemade spicy chili sauce. Mr. Hale took one bite. He didn't gush about how good it was. He just asked, "Can you start the morning shift tomorrow?" I said yes. I was in the kitchen at 6 every morning, and didn't leave until 9 at night. The first week, I cut my hand twice and burned myself with oil a handful of times. Tess saw the blisters and fussed over me. Furious. "You used to run dozens of restaurants. Why are you starting over from chopping vegetables?" "Because I need to know I can still cook without those restaurants behind me." Once the Sterling name was stripped away, I had to find out for myself what was left. At the end of the month, Mr. Hale deposited my first paycheck. The amount was less than what I'd spend in a day on Graham's supplementary card, but I stared at the deposit notification for a long time. That night, I used a small part of the money to buy fish and ribs. Back at Tess's place, I made a 3-dishes soup set. 2 place settings sat on the table. Halfway through the meal, Tess suddenly started crying. "Mrs. Reed always used to tell me to eat more." I bowed my head and drank my soup. A tear fell into the bowl. I didn't pour it out. It was the first meal I'd earned with my own 2 hands since leaving Graham, and the first time I'd truly felt full since my mother died. The kitchen was loud. the exhaust fan humming away. Don't bother bringing it. And tell him something else. His lawyer's letter will arrive at the office today. The assistant went quiet. You're suing Mr. Sterling. No, we're auditing the equity I hold, the dividends from past years, and the terms for the recipes I developed for the brand. Some of the rights were laid out in clear contracts. Others only existed in emails and meeting minutes. My lawyer warned me the audit and negotiations would take time. The parts without solid evidence might not hold up. I wasn't going to fabricate some magic proof that would make Graham hand over his company overnight. I only sorted out what I actually had. The original partnership agreement, bank transfers, emails proving my work on brand development, and the confirmed ownership percentage in years of financial documents. That afternoon, Graham showed up in person. He stood in the doorway of the greasy, smoke-filled kitchen in his expensive coat, completely out of place. The owner thought he was a customer and greeted him warmly, but he only had eyes for me. You'd rather chop vegetables here than come back. I took off my gloves. I'm working. Sterling Hospitality has a dozen locations. If you want it, the RD director position is still yours. You've got it wrong. That position was mine to build. It wasn't a handout from you. His face darkened. You really want to nickel and dime me over this? I really do. Fine. Graham slapped a document down on the prep table. Call off the lawyer, and I'll cash out all 8% for you. I didn't touch it. Talk to my lawyer, Vivian Reed. Everyone in the kitchen turned to look. Graham lowered his voice. 7 years together, and you want a stranger in the middle of this? That's exactly why we're here. Because 7 years together, I never checked the contracts, never audited the dividends, never left myself a backup plan. Now that we're broken up, business should be handled by professionals. He stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. You're really sure about this? I'm sure. I can make it right. For Mrs. Reed. I looked up at him. How? Bring her back. Or give her that mistreatment. Graham had nothing to say. No amount of compensation can rewrite a death certificate. So don't bring it up again. The boss called for food from the front. I put my gloves back on. Mr. Sterling, please leave. It was the first time I'd ever called him that. He stood there for a long time, then picked up the document and walked out. I thought he'd finally gotten the message. That same night, he had the locks disabled on the apartment my mother had been renting. He still thought if he took one more thing away, I'd cave. My mother's things were still inside. The apartment had been on a long-term lease through Sterling, and Graham had paid the rent. That much was true. He had every right to terminate the lease, but he had no right to hold my personal belongings hostage. My lawyer contacted the property management and the landlord, and arranged for us to clear out her things under witness. No breaking doors, no drama. 3 days later, I got back my mother's 2 cardboard boxes of belongings. Graham was standing in the living room the whole time. He'd probably waited there on purpose, expecting me to beg him, but the whole time, I only spoke to the property manager, the landlord, and my lawyer. When I was carrying out the last box, he finally stepped in front of me. Where have you been staying? None of your business. How much does that little diner pay you? Also none of your business. Vivian, do you have to talk to me like this? I checked the ceiling label on the box. Is there anything else we need to inventory? He suddenly grabbed the box. The bottom split open, and an old voice recorder clattered to the floor. It was the one Mom had used to write down doctor's orders while she was in the hospital. The button had been jostled on impact. Her weak voice filled the room. Vivian, Graham brought soup today. Said he was too busy to come up. Don't be mad at him. It's good for young people to have careers. The next clip was 2 months later. Vivian's been crying again. Said Graham's been spending time with that Miss Voss girl. She's always been stubborn. That kid, when she cares about someone, she gives them everything. The last clip was from a week before she died. Graham hasn't been here in so long. I don't think I'll live to see their wedding, if he doesn't love her anymore. That's okay. I just hope she doesn't beg anyone, doesn't let herself be mistreated for my sake. The recording cut off. Graham let go of the box. The anger was gone from his face. Mrs. Reed was waiting for me. I picked up the voice recorder. She made excuses for you until the very end. You don't deserve to hear this. The property manager helped me carry the boxes into the elevator. As the doors were closing, Graham stuck his hand out to stop them. You were outside Cloudview that whole night. I didn't answer. Security only told me you'd stopped by. Serena had a fever. I didn't want you coming in and upsetting her. I didn't know you were sick too. I had no idea you were out there on your knees. I looked at him. Now you know. So what, if you kneel out there all night? Will my mom come back? The elevator doors slid shut again. This time, he didn't stop them. Later, during the equity and dividend audit, my lawyer received Sterling Hospitality's explanation of the medical benefits account. Tucked into the materials, by accident, were the internal communication logs from the day the treatment was revoked. 3:08 p.m. Graham ordered finance to suspend payment authorization. 3:26 p.m. Hospital called for the first time, confirming the medication required payment confirmation by 4:30. 3:40 p.m. Secretary forwarded the hospital's reminder to Graham. His reply, hold off for now. 4:07 p.m. Hospital called again, stating the out-of-town specialist would not wait past the appointment time. The secretary asked if they should process payment first and deal with the personal conflict later. This time, Graham didn't type a reply. He sent a 10-second voice memo. She can go to Cloudview and apologize when she's ready. Then we'll reinstate it. One treatment delayed a couple days isn't going to kill anyone. Every timestamp was logged in the system. He hadn't been completely in the dark. He just thought he knew better than the doctors what the consequences would be, and he'd been sure I'd cave eventually. The records couldn't prove he'd legally caused my mother's death. The doctors had been clear the direct cause was complications from late-stage cancer. But they did prove one thing. He'd had 2 chances to end that punishment. He'd chosen not to take either one. His secretary reached out to me on her own later. Ms. Reed, I'm so sorry. I should have pushed harder that day. It's not your fault. You didn't make the call. She was quiet for a moment. Mr. Sterling's been going through all the records from that day. He asked me why I didn't tell him how serious it was. I heard her. Calm as anything. You did tell him. He just didn't want to listen. When people make a mistake, the first thing they look for isn't the reason why. It's someone else to share the blame. The hospital, the secretary, Serena, even me. Feverish and kneeling in the snow, all of them were people he could ask why of. But the person who actually owed an answer was always him. Graham went to the hospital. I found out about it later. From one of the nurses. He'd brought a copy of my mother's medical records and asked the doctor if things would have been different if the treatment hadn't been cancelled. The doctor didn't give him the answer he wanted. Medicine can't rewrite what's already happened for anyone. My mother's answer was end stage. Even with the treatment as planned, she might have passed away soon anyway. But what Graham had personally revoked was, in fact, a treatment opportunity that had been carefully evaluated and scheduled. He asked if they could restore the payment record from that day. The billing office pulled up the system logs, the time of cancellation, the authorized account. The notes, everything was crystal clear. The note said only one line, hold for 2 days. Pending personal confirmation. He'd told his secretary to write that. He hadn't meant to stop the treatment forever. He'd only wanted 2 days to teach me a lesson in obedience. But life hadn't paused to follow his schedule. Graham went to Cloudview after that. The security guard handed him the visitor log from that night. I'd arrived at 5:40 p.m. I'd been picked up by the hospital's car at 1:20 a.m. 7.5 hours. Serena looked at the log, her voice impatient. Who told her to actually kneel out there? I just wanted a meal. You just wanted her to apologize. She knew she had a fever and still stayed out there. Wasn't she just trying to make a big scene? Graham looked at her. Did you know Vivian's mother was having treatment that day? Serena looked away. You mentioned it when you took the call. Why didn't you tell me she was outside the whole time, and let you leave my welcome dinner to go after her? Serena's eyes welled up. Graham, your family drove me away back then. Now I'm finally back. I just wanted to know if you'd still choose me. I asked her to cook because I wanted an answer. Graham was quiet for a long time. So her mother's treatment was just a multiple choice question to you. Serena started crying. I didn't revoke the treatment. I didn't block her number either. Graham, don't put all this on me just because you feel guilty. It was harsh. But it wasn't wrong. Graham cut off all personal arrangements he'd made for Serena that day. He told her to move out of Cloudview. and stopped paying off the debts she'd accumulated since coming back. Serena posted about how cold-hearted he was on her Instagram, but getting rid of her didn't mean he loved me again, and it didn't erase what he'd chosen. When he told me all this later, I only asked one thing: why are you telling me about you and her? Graham had nothing to say. I was already out of that love triangle. Whatever they felt for each other, love or hate, didn't need an audience from me anymore. I worked at that small diner for 3 months. The pay wasn't great, but it helped me find my way back to the stove. Every morning, I went to the market with the owner to buy ingredients. At the lunch rush, I'd stir-fry dozens of orders back to back. At night after closing, I worked on my own menu. Tess asked me why I didn't just take Graham's money and open my own place. It's your dividend money anyway. The lawyer's still auditing it. Money that isn't in my account isn't mine yet. The equity and dividend negotiations dragged on for 6 months. At first, Sterling Hospitality only recognized my paid-in shares and claimed the incentive equity hadn't vested. Both sides went through employment records, board documents, and years of financial reports. My lawyer told me a lawsuit would take forever. I didn't rush to settle. In the end, Sterling agreed to buy back the confirmed vested shares at a third-party valuation and backpay the dividends supported by documentation. I took my lawyer's advice and dropped the disputed recipe licensing fees. Not every effort has a paper trail to prove it. That was the lesson I'd bought with 7 years of my life. The day the money hit my account, I didn't celebrate. First, I paid back all the money I'd borrowed for my mother's treatment, then set aside 6 months of living expenses. With what was left, I rented a tiny storefront on a busy street. It wasn't far from the cancer hospital. I named it Ella Viv's Bistro. My mother was Eleanor Reed. Everyone called her Ella. I was Vivian. There were only 8 tables in the whole place. No fancy, expensive dishes. Every day, I set aside 20 light, gentle meal sets, sold at cost to family members of hospital patients. I knew better than anyone how good a hot meal felt after a long day sitting by a hospital bed. On opening day, Graham sent 100 flower baskets. They blocked the whole street. I had the florist take them all back. The next day, he sent an expensive carved wooden sign. I refused delivery. The third day, he came himself. The shop was busy. He sat in the corner booth and ordered a bowl of clear chicken noodle soup. It was the same thing he'd eaten the first time we met. I made it like I always did. When I set it down, there was a flicker of hope in his eyes. You remembered. It's one of only 2 noodle dishes on the menu. I pushed the payment QR code toward him. $8.50. He paid, but didn't pick up his chopsticks. Vivian, I'll put Riverside Residences in your name. No. Thanks. It was our home. It wasn't. I gestured around the room. This is mine. Graham looked at the old photo of my mother on the wall. I want to do something for Mrs. Reed. She doesn't need anything from you anymore. What about for you? I don't need anything either. A customer called for a rice refill from the back. I turned to go get it. Graham finally ate the bowl of noodles. When he left, there wasn't a drop of broth left in the bowl. But this time, finishing my food wouldn't buy him back my love. Graham started coming to the shop regularly. He stopped bringing gifts. He just sat in the farthest booth and ate. Sometimes a bowl of noodles, sometimes a meal set. I treated him like any other customer. He scanned the code. I made the food. Nothing more, nothing less. Tess put up with it for a month, then finally confronted him. Mr. Sterling, who are you putting on this sad show for? Graham set down his chopsticks. I just want to see her. You saw her every day back then. Did you ever appreciate her? He didn't answer. She called you 47 times when Mrs. Reed was dying. Even if you come 470 times now, it won't make up for one of those calls. Graham hung his head. After that day, he stopped showing up for a while. I thought he'd finally given up. On the first anniversary of my mother's death, I closed the shop for half a day and brought her favorite citrus sweet rice cakes to the cemetery. Graham was standing in front of the headstone. A bouquet of white chrysanthemums lay on the ground. When he saw me, he stepped aside. I just came to say I'm sorry. Are you done? No. He turned toward the grave, his voice low. Mrs. Reed. I'm sorry. I thought 2 days was nothing. I thought everything could wait until I'd cooled off. I never thought someone could be gone in 2 days. I set down the rice cakes. You can say you're sorry, but she doesn't owe you forgiveness. I know, you don't either. Graham pulled a small box out of his pocket. Inside was a ring. 7 years earlier, he'd said he'd marry me once the brand had 10 locations. Then 10 became 50, and the ring never appeared. Now, the long overdue thing was finally being offered to me. Vivian, I'm not asking you to say yes right now. You can take as long as you want, a year, 2 years, however long. I'll make up for everything I owe you. Little by little, I closed the box and put it back in his hand. Graham, when Mom first died, I did hate you. I used to wonder if you'd answered the phone that night. If the treatment hadn't been stopped, would she have had one more day with me? Then I stopped wondering. It's not forgiveness. I just don't want to waste the rest of my life on a question that has no answer. He gripped the box tight. 7 years together. You really don't love me at all anymore. I did love you. That's exactly why I gave you so many chances over those 7 years. Breaking up wasn't an impulse from the first disappointment. It was after the last one, when I'd used up every last chance. I knelt down to wipe the headstone clean. Graham stood behind me for a long time. Before he left, he only said one thing: I won't bother you again. He didn't quite keep his word, but at least he stopped showing up in person. Every once in a while, an anonymous donation would come into the hospital's patient assistance program. The hospital staff asked if I knew the donor. I said no. It wasn't paying back a debt to my mother. It wasn't making amends to me. If that money actually helped people, that was between Graham and the people who received it. I didn't owe him gratitude. I didn't stand in his way either. Business at Ella Viv's Bistro slowly stabilized. Patient families knew about the daily low-cost meals and would sign up in the group chat ahead of time. Some people came back to thank me after their loved ones were discharged. Some never came back at all. I learned to stop asking about the outcome. I just focused on making the day's meals right. One winter night, the hospital called. An elderly woman in her final hours was craving a bowl of hand-rolled egg noodles. Her family asked if I could make a special order. I'd already turned off the stoves, but I mixed up a fresh batch of dough anyway. When I delivered it to the ward, the old woman only ate 2 bites. Her daughter thanked me over and over. She hasn't been able to eat anything these past few days. Just getting a taste means so much. When I walked out of the hospital, it was snowing again, just as hard as the night my mother died. I stood at the bottom of the steps. I didn't think about kneeling outside Cloudview Estate anymore. I only thought about when I was little. Mom picking me up from school on her bike. The roads were slippery from snow, and she'd told me to tuck my hands into her coat pockets. I'd leaned against her back, and I hadn't been cold at all. Tess pulled up in her car. She rolled down the window and yelled, "Hey, boss lady, hurry up. It's freezing out here." I ran over and got in. The car was warm, and there was a hot soy milk she'd bought me in the cup holder. Did the old lady get to eat? Just 2 bites. Then it was worth it. I held the soy milk and nodded. Yeah, some things you make it in time for, some things you don't. I couldn't go back to that afternoon when my mother's treatment was cancelled, but from now on, I would never hand the reins of my life over to anyone else ever again. 2 years later, Sterling Hospitality Group was preparing to go public. In a financial interview, the host asked Graham Sterling what decision he regretted most during his entrepreneurial journey. He was silent for a long time, treating someone who loved me like a safety net that would always be there. The clip went viral as a short video, shared everywhere. Some people recognized he was talking about me. Others even showed up at Ella Viv's Bistro, asking if there was a happy ending to the second chance romance. I turned down every interview request. One failed relationship didn't deserve to be the only thing defining the rest of my life. Right before Sterling went public, my lawyer contacted me one last time. The company wanted to buy full licensing rights to a few of the early dishes I'd developed, and the brand origin story. The contract offer was fair, the terms clear. I signed it. Tess didn't get it. Doesn't that weird you out? I'm licensing my work, not my feelings. If it's worth the price, I'll take it. What if Graham thinks this means you want to get back together? I smiled a little. If he still can't tell the difference between a business contract and love, that's his problem. The whole signing process was handled between the lawyers and Sterling's legal team. Graham didn't use it as an excuse to show up. After the money came through, I expanded the bistro's kitchen and hired 2 full-time staff. I opened a second location near another hospital. I also partnered with a social work organization to provide meal vouchers for caregiving families in genuine need. Every voucher was tracked and logged. I didn't rely on anyone's fleeting kindness, and I never made anyone receiving help have to bow down to someone. The sense of security my mother had been missing, I was slowly giving it to other people, in my own way. On the day the new location opened, I received an unsigned package. Inside was only a photo album. The first picture was of Graham and me, eating takeout in that empty storefront all those years ago. The last was from the early days of Mom's hospital stay. Graham sitting with us in the sun downstairs. Tucked in the back of the album was a note. "I'm sorry, and thank you, for loving me, truly, no plea. No return address." I read it, then put the album in a storage box. I didn't burn it. I didn't set it on the nightstand. The past didn't need to be destroyed. It just needed to be put somewhere it wouldn't get in the way of today. 3 years after my mother died, I bought the Ella Viv's Bistro storefront outright. The day I got the deed, I brought it to the cemetery to show her. "Mom, you don't have to worry about the landlord raising the rent anymore. I don't owe anyone money. I eat on time every day. I barely stay up late anymore." The cemetery was quiet, just like I used to do in her hospital room. I told her everything, one thing at a time. When I was leaving, I ran into Graham at the bottom of the hill. 3 years apart, he looked thinner than before. His driver waited far away. He was walking up the steps alone. When he saw me, he stopped. "Long time no see, long time no see." He glanced at the deed envelope in my hand. "You bought the bistro?" "Yeah, congratulations." "Thanks." After those few short words, we both fell quiet. Back when we were together, we could talk over a meal until late into the night. Now that it was truly over, there was no need for harsh words. Graham stepped aside to let me pass. "Vivian." I turned around. I still have the call logs from that night. Sometimes I wonder if I'd answered the 47th call. "Graham." I cut him off. "Don't wonder anymore. It's not for your sake. It's because that question doesn't have anything to do with me anymore." He looked at me, then slowly nodded. "Okay." We walked in opposite directions. He was going to see someone who could never hear his apology. I was going back to the life that was still going on. That night, after closing up the bistro, I made myself a bowl of noodles. The broth was made from my mother's old recipe. When I was little, she'd make me a bowl every year on my birthday. She'd always tuck a poached egg under the noodles, so I'd find it at the very end. I did the same thing she did, hiding the egg at the bottom. When I got to the end, the soft white poached egg peeked out. I sat by the window alone and suddenly smiled. Mom had told me to cook for myself from now on. I'd finally kept that promise. Graham had once thought a single meal could force me to bow down. Later, he'd realized the truth. The reason I'd ever been willing to cook for someone wasn't because they had the power to order me around. It was because I loved them. Once that love was gone, no amount of expensive compensation, no amount of waiting, could ever bring back that old, warm domesticity. Outside, the sky grew dark. The first streetlight flickered on down the block. I washed my bowl and turned off the kitchen stove. Tomorrow's menu was already written out. The first dish was the hearty chicken potato stew I'd made for my trial shift back in the diner. The second was the steamed white fish my mother had taught me. At the very bottom of the page, I'd written one more line carefully. "Save 2 portions for staff meal. Don't forget to eat when it gets busy." Once upon a time, I'd always saved the very best bite for Graham. Now I'd finally learned to save one for myself, too. Tomorrow, I had my own road to walk.